Hello there. Welcome to my company profile series. And this is a series of videos where I look at the Eink note-taking marketplace. And instead of focusing on particular devices, which is what I normally do on my channel, I'm taking a look at the companies behind them and taking a broader look, albeit a quick look, at who these companies are, kind of where they play in the marketplace, and so on. So this first episode is going to be focused on Mobiscribe. Now, Mobiscribe plays in what I would term the both worlds segment of the market. So let me kind of explain that. I generally break the marketplace down into three sections. So the first section would be reading first, writing second, and that's epitomized by like the Kindle Scribe and the Kobo Ellipsa 2e and other devices like that. Then there's the market segment that's more writing focused, reading second, and those are things like the Remarkable 2, the Supernote series of devices. They kind of live in that place in the market. And then there's this both worlds segment, and this is where Mobiscribe exists. And there's a couple of things that kind of epitomizes this market segment. First off, as the name suggests, there is kind of not necessarily equal, but much more balanced focus between the reading app and the note-taking app on these devices. But also they share the common theme of having access to the Google Play Store. So you've got the native apps available on the device and apps that you can download through Google. So that's kind of what makes up these types of devices and this type of market. And Mobiscribe is definitely here in the both sides section of the marketplace. So let's take a quick look at their kind of current product offerings, and you'll notice that they're pretty focused. They don't have any devices in the 10 or 13 inch reading space. Instead, they actually have two devices in the marketplace currently. One is the black and white Mobiscribe Wave, which is also a device I gave an award to earlier in the year as kind of the best entry level note-taking device. And then there's a color variant based on Kaleido Plus of that same model. So there are some themes that run across their portfolio, such as it is, of two devices. And the first thing that sticks out is that they are really inexpensive relative to the marketplace. They're very much entry level on their prices. Currently, the black and white model is retailing at a discounted $200, and then the color model about $299. I'll talk a little bit about comparable devices and their prices in a little bit, but generally speaking, these are about as cheap as you can get in terms of purchasing devices that have e-note-taking functionality. In addition to that, they have notably a really detailed note-taking app. In fact, I would argue that they're not at the level of books or of Supernote, but they're next in line. So it's a pretty impressive for a entry-level device to have such a sophisticated note-taking app without being too overwhelming. The UI is pretty clean and straightforward, so it's a good balance on these Mobiscribe devices. And the last thing that's really super important, in my opinion anyway, is the fact that they're waterproof. And the reason why I focus on that, and I'll touch on this in a little bit more detail, is I think it's critical in helping to carve these devices in a unique niche on the market. So the pricing coupled with the waterproof design, I think makes it ideal for travel. But again, I'll get into a little bit more detail on those thoughts in a bit. Maybe more on the negative side, the devices are not as premium, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. The hardware has a little bit of a sunken screen, so you do have a ridge around the bezel, for example. The software can sometimes be maybe a touch sluggish relative to more premium devices, where you might click on a function, particularly in the system UI, and you might have to wait a few beats for that to register. It doesn't go to the level of being unacceptable, but you do notice it relative to premium devices. So it's definitely not playing at that part of the market, and that's consistent with its pricing. I think the main use case for it, and I've kind of alluded to this just a second ago, is taking it on with travel. I think as a 7.8 inch device, it's a little bit bulky for that screen size because the bezel's a little bit large. But it's still pretty good to carry around. You can carry it in a bag quite easily. The waterproof design makes it ideal. You don't have to worry about hanging around next to a pool or whatever. And then it's got a stylus, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's a nice thin stylus. I just think it all comes in a very travel-friendly package. Like other devices of this screen size, I think that lends itself well to reading and journaling based on that reading, because you can read either in the native app or download something like Kindle or Kobo, and then read from that app. And if you wanted to then take notes in a separate note-taking app, then this device would be ideal for that. So those are some of the specific attributes which I think are a little bit unique to these devices, particularly the waterproof aspect of it. And so that's where I think that people who might be interested in a travel note-taking device would want to definitely consider the Mobiscribe. So what are maybe some alternatives from other device manufacturers that you would consider if not the Mobiscribe? And I've come up with 3. Although none of them are really comparable in terms of price. And Mobiscribe has a unique piece of the market in that regard. But I would point to the Supernote's A6X2 as a potential alternate. Specifically, if you were really focused on the writing experience and note-taking on that type of size of a device, that's an excellent option. If you bought that device along with a basic cover and a basic stylus from the Supernote website, that's about $407, which is also a black and white device. So there is, you can see, a huge gap between the $200 black and white Mobiscribe device, which is the current prices of this filming, and then the Supernote. But on the flip of it, the Supernote has an even more sophisticated note-taking app that's really curated for that purpose. I do point out, though, however, that although there's a limited amount of apps available on the Supernote, Amazon Kindle is one of those apps. So you can read on the Supernote as well. If you are looking for a device that has much more of a balance with a focus on color, the Bigme's S6 Color Plus Light is a great option at $350, as is the Books Tab Mini C, which is currently listing around $400. Both of those devices come with a stylus and a cover, by the way. I would lean toward the S6 Color Plus if you were a little more reading focused. If you were looking at a more sophisticated note-taking app, then you might move more toward the Books device. Both devices, I think, do an equal job of handling Google Play apps well. So if you were getting one of these devices to read, like Kindle or Kobo, both Books and the Bigme are pretty much comparable in that regard. Books definitely has the advantage of, again, the more sophisticated note-taking app and also the more sophisticated reading app. And that reading app is what you would use if you were downloading your own files onto the device, like EPUB files and PDFs and what have you. So Books has the advantage there, but Bigme has a more than acceptable, albeit it's a little more basic note-taking app and that $50 discount. So those are a couple comparable devices to consider if you weren't going the direction of some of Mobiscribe's devices. So I think the elephant in the room with Mobiscribe right now is a question about their future. Are they going to be around, or are they going to shut down operations relatively soon? Now, I don't know that either way, but let me just give you a few points of information of why I even suggest this to begin with. So the first thing is, if you look at their social media, and they reference 4 different social media sites on their webpage where you can purchase their devices. So things like Facebook and Instagram and a couple others. All their posts in these social media sites are, their last post was at least 6 months ago. And that's kind of like a singular 1 or 2 posts. And then there's a gap in time before really the last bulk of posts that they've had on social media. So there's this kind of non-engagement that's suggestive. In addition to that, if you go on to their website, you can see their devices, their 2 devices are both on sale. The color variant, which uses the previous generation of Kaleido Color Eink, is currently $299 when it was $320, so a $20 discount there. That's not too significant. But the black and white variant is now listing for $200 when it was $260, so $60 off. All this kind of gives you that feeling like they're clearing inventory. And so the question then becomes, why? In addition to that, not too recently on their website, they had a coming soon version of a Kaleido 3 model. That is the most current generation of color e-ink, and that's gone. In fact, I think I remember a review of that Kaleido 3 model on my Deep Guide and maybe other places on YouTube as well. So what happened? How come it's not being listed on the website anymore when devices went out for review? Now, alternate to those facts is that if you go to the subreddit for the Mobiscribe subreddit, there actually was a posting from a representative from Mobiscribe less than 3 weeks ago as of the filming of this video. And then that posting, which is a fairly lengthy post, the individual basically talks about all the things that Mobiscribe is working on to make the user experience better, which is different. That certainly implies that they're in an ongoing concern and they intend to stay in the marketplace for a while. So we have a little bit of conflicting messages here, and what the truth is, I guess we won't know until we get there. Now, you could interpret this in two different ways. So one way to interpret it is the way that I'm kind of alluding to, which is there's all these signs that maybe the company is kind of winding down and they're just trying to clear inventory, and then they're going to cease operations. That's one interpretation. But there's another interpretation too, and that's they're just trying to clear out inventory. They were originally posting their new device. They decided to pull that until they can clear all the old inventory, and then they'll make a new push with this new device and maybe others. Now, that's speculative on my part. I certainly don't know which is true. But I just want to point out that this is a thing, and it's good and important to know if you're going to buy a Mobiscribe device. What is the status of the company going forward is certainly a consideration. Having said that, and now we're shifting into the segment of the video where I just kind of give my general thoughts about the company. I don't know if that's a problem. If you're someone that was considering a Mobiscribe device, and you're hearing this news, they might not be around, I'm not sure that should dissuade you from moving forward. And the reason why I say that is that there are cloud services that Mobiscribe provides, which essentially is a file backup service for the notebooks, and I think for documents as well. And that probably might be at risk. But Mobiscribe has other integrated services. They have Dropbox and Evernote, where you could also back up your files. So it's not as if you won't have that ability anymore. And the device itself, as far as I know, even if the company were to shut down, would pretty much, outside of those cloud services, just function as usual. For example, there should be no difference in Google Play and the access to those apps, and everything else should be fine. You won't get any updates potentially, but that's about the extent of it. So as far as I can tell, I think that's the only downside are these cloud services. And certainly put a comment below if there's something I hadn't thought of, which can definitely be the case. But that's kind of my general sense is that, I'm not so sure if you're thinking about buying a Mobiscribe, you should be too dissuaded about this potential that they might not be around. I want to say a brief word about their marketing position because I find it kind of this interesting dichotomy of being both potentially brilliant and also risky. And so the brilliant part, and I've kind of alluded to this up until this point, is that they really have done a great job in creating a product that's very unique in the marketplace. Again, I don't believe there's any other e-note-taking device that is waterproof, except for perhaps the Kobo Libra color, and maybe the previous variant of that. But generally speaking, it's a very unique niche that Mobiscribe is filling. And again, with that great note-taking app, the size, the waterproof nature, I just think it's a great for traveling, as well as great as an entry-level note-taking device. So when you look at the device, and this isn't always true of e-ink devices, what the marketplace is that they're going for. It's kind of obvious what they're going for, and the package makes a lot of sense. So that's the brilliant part of their strategy. The interesting part about that, though, is if they were successful, if they really took the marketplace by storm, and unfortunately, these devices, not just Mobiscribes, but e-ink devices in general, very opaque information about what's going on. So it's really hard to say, other than maybe looking at a bestseller list on a site like Amazon.com, but even then, that's very in the moment. It's really hard to say how they're doing, but I just get the sense that they, didn't like take the marketplace by storm. But if they had, is their market position defensible? In other words, let's say that, this hypothetical, these devices take off, all these Kindle e-reader folks are moving up to this note-taking device. What's to prevent Amazon from saying, oh, there's a lot of interest in having a smaller scribe. We'll just release one with waterproof features, and then suddenly Mobiscribe's position is not as defensible as it was, even though they might still be the superior device, particularly with their note-taking app. So it's just kind of interesting to think about how they play in the market and what the ramifications would be if they became wildly successful. It's kind of interesting, just something I kind of enjoy thinking about. I think the last thing I'll say is just in full transparency is that even though I own a Mobiscribe, I have the black and white wave, I don't use it myself. And I don't think that's an indictment on the device, but it's a recognition of where it is in the marketplace. I think there's a lot of people where the Mobiscribe is a really good device. And I've kind of talked about that already with travel and an entry-level e-reader. But I have other devices. I have a lot of devices, actually, because of this channel. And I have, the best devices in the marketplace, whether it's the Supernote A5X for note-taking or the Books Note Air 3C for other kind of note-taking and reading. And I use the Bigme S6 Color Plus. I think it's a fantastic e-reader. I have a Kobo Ellipsa. I've got a lot of devices. And so because I have these more premium devices, these snappier devices, the Mobiscribe doesn't really fit for me. But that, again, isn't to say that it's not a good device. I definitely recommend it to people, particularly as an entry-level device and for all the things that we've talked about. But I did want to say in full disclosure that because of all the other devices that I have, I don't find myself using the Mobiscribe device much. So anyway, that is my profile of the Mobiscribe company. If anybody has other information, maybe some facts that I got wrong or things that I didn't mention, please feel free to enter those into the comments. And I'll just say overall, much like a lot of companies in this space, I think Mobiscribe brings something valuable to the table. I hope they remain an ongoing concern. I certainly hope that they aren't shutting down. And it's definitely possible. Again, this speculation that they might be is purely my own. I have nothing but the tea leaves to look at. So take that with a grain of salt. But hopefully you found this overall profile helpful. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll be sure to answer. Until I see you again, have a great day.